The 1980s were an exciting time for music. You had vinyl, cassettes, CDs sold simultaneously, providing the listeners with a ton of options. But what happened to the MiniDisc in the 1990s and 2000s? There's still a subculture of MiniDisc enthusiasts out there that still use and love the format. Let's find out why. This fresh new format was supposed to be the successor of the cassette tape, providing listeners the ability to have an ultra-compact way to listen to music without carrying around a bulky Walkman or a cumbersome Discman that, at the time, still hadn't completely mastered its anti-skip technology. After the craze of the infamous mixtape, Sony wanted to create a product for a new market of music listeners in the 90s. In 1992, Sony released the MiniDisc after a failed attempt to create a new format while again partnering with Philips as they did with the compact disc. However, things hit a bit of a roadblock when both companies started bumping heads on what they had envisioned for this project. Sony wanted to build upon the now popular optical media, however Philips was kind of living in the past and had its sights set on something that could be backwards compatible with the cassettes, eventually coming up with the DCC or digital compact cassette, which completely fell on its face just a few years after its release. So because of this enormous difference of opinion, the companies just decided to scrap the project and just go their separate ways. After a couple of years, Sony developed the MiniDisc, a smaller, more durable version of the compact disc. The MiniDiscs were 3 inches squared, and like the floppy disk, which I am sure only a happy few of us still remember, they were fully enclosed in their plastic case to ensure the tiny disc stayed clean. Just like CDs, these little discs were read with a laser and provided the listener with, at the time, high-quality digital sound. However, MiniDiscs' rewritability is what really set them apart from all the other formats. This was a bit before the CDRW came to be, mind you. You might be thinking, well, couldn't you re-record on a cassette? Yes, you could. However, the quality of the recording degraded substantially after each time you recorded over the previous music. MiniDiscs offered a way to erase and rewrite information onto the disc just like a hard drive could, as many times as you needed without sacrificing sound quality. This was way ahead of its time, and was just completely forward-thinking technology by Sony. A memory buffer allowed data to be stored, providing seamless playback and the ability to shake the player without having it skip. It seemed too good to be true. It had the durability of cassettes and was close to the quality of CDs in a much smaller package. I was curious about how Sony fits an entire CD at or close to CD quality in a disc a fraction of its size. What they did was develop an algorithm that compressed the audio. Think of it as like a prehistoric AAC file, 8-track or adaptive transform acoustic coding, analyze the sound coming in and remove the parts of the music that it believed were inaudible to the listener. So this allowed music to be written to the tiny disc at a fraction of the size, and Sony strongly felt that listeners will probably be hard-pressed to tell the difference between the MiniDisc and its daddy, the CD. In a time where CDs were starting to catch on and the price of CD players was becoming more affordable, I'm curious why Sony decided this was a good time to introduce an entirely new format to the public. Sony's marketing department targeted the MTV generation for the MiniDisc project, so essentially my generation. So I didn't end up owning one until like 2002, and it was for a brief moment and I lost it. The kids they were marketing to couldn't afford the portable unit since their launch price was around $700. Do you know who could afford it? Audiophiles. Do you know who didn't want it? Audiophiles. They felt that the 8-track compression affected the sound quality enough that they were not interested in participating in this new format. To a degree, I didn't blame them. I kind of agree with them, since they had Redbook CDs at their disposal. The MiniDisc wasn't well received. It flopped a bit in the US. In Japan, though, holy mackerel, this thing took off. See, Japan has always been a huge proponent of music. The Japanese love music. It was god-awful expensive to buy music though, because what would cost us like 14 or 15 bucks here for like a CD in the States, for a CD there, it would be double. So what happened was that music rental stores started popping up. Yes, you heard it right. Just like Blockbuster for music, but not Blockbuster Music. You could rent a CD daily for a fraction of the cost, and most people took them home and made copies on, you guessed it, MiniDiscs. So this pissed off the domestic music industry because they saw this as a horrible loss. So the Japanese government made the rental spots pay royalties on the rentals and added a tax on blank media to ensure both sides were happy and well compensated. By 1998, MiniDisc players were beating out the Discman in Japan. One thing I thought was cool is they actually had kiosks in convenience stores and supermarkets where you could bring your blank MiniDisc and stick it in, select the songs you want on it, and the kiosk would record them right then and there. you would pay per song. It was like iTunes inside of a red box. Weird, but cool for its time. I actually really dig it. In the late 1990s, the MiniDisc player had a breakout in Europe. There was a huge desire for it. No matter how popular they got though, CDs remained the music industry's heavy hitter and format standard. After the MP3 player came around in the early 2000s, the MiniDisc player slowly faded, even though the MP3 was severely inferior to the quality of the MiniDiscs. Sony felt their Rocky II moment was on the horizon though, so they decided to release the NetMD. This new technology was meant to throw a right hook at the MP3 player industry, allowing you to connect your new portable player and recorder to your laptop or PC via a USB cable. You can drag and drop all those MP3s directly onto the MiniDisc player. Once the iPod came around and iTunes was released, it was another huge blow to the physical media for this up-and-coming generation. Sony didn't call it quits though. They were persistent. In 2004, they released what I have right here, the Hi-MD, which increased the storage size of the disc to 1 gigabyte and made uncompressed audio an option for the disc. I bet audiophiles perked up for this one. They were backwards compatible with the original MiniDisc, and you could also hook these up to your computers as the NetMD could. I think this would still be a good piece of relevant retro tech you could use today. However, back in the early to mid 2000s, the MP3 and then the new generation of music listeners adopted streaming services. This was in fact the final blow for the MiniDisc player in the US. However, today in 2022, where everyone loves retro tech and the old is new and the new is good, Sony is still making blank media for the MiniDisc, even though it stopped production of the actual players in September of 2011. So why are they doing this? Well, indie bands. They have released their music in small batches via Bandcamp and other mediums using MiniDiscs, which I think is completely rad. The fact that they are limited run and limited edition copies make them appealing to their fan base and the collectors alike. The website www.bandcds.co.uk will record custom MiniDiscs for bands and artists. I was thinking actually about doing a limited run for my upcoming album as a cool way to provide my audience with something different and unique. We'll see. This is yet another form of physical media to begin to make its way back into the hearts and hands of the music listeners. There's a formidable cult following for the MiniDisc. I am part of several MiniDisc Facebook groups and forums online that are very active. It's how I met the man who sold me this Hi-MD player. So I bet some of you who are interested in this format want to know how to get it up and running and how you are supposed to work this old tech with a new PC. Well, I found a link to a version of Sonic Stage Ultimate that will work on Windows 11. It's super easy, drag and drop. I will leave a link to the software in the description below. I went ahead and made I'm not sure what to call this, a mini mix. I recorded some of my favorite songs on a regular MiniDisc since you can still buy them on Amazon. I felt the sound quality was in between a MP3 and a CD. Not the best, but by far not as bad as an MP3. I think this is cool for someone who is a die-hard fan of this media or a collector who likes retro tech. Is it something I see as forward-thinking technology at this point, or will it make a huge comeback? Sadly, I don't think so. We have gotten so far with flash media that if there is a new form of physical media, it will probably be based on a flash media type of architecture. Don't get me wrong, I think the novelty of the MiniDisc is super cool. It sounds good, it's portable, and it brings back memories. However, the players themselves are becoming harder to obtain in good condition. This one I bought came a bit beat up. I had to do a little bit of work on it. However, if you have some money to spend, it's a fun adventure. It's just my opinion that looking ahead and moving forward, there will only be a couple formats that will last a test of time, and at this moment, it's probably going to be the CD and vinyl record, only because manufacturers are still actively selling and releasing new players each year. However, if MiniDisc is your passion and your format, then I'm behind you 100%, and I hope you enjoy your experience with it. If you learned something today, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and check out this video to find out how CDs are made. And as always, trust your ears. Take care.